Hello, hello, and welcome back to Shelf Talks, the podcast where we dive deep into the journeys of female founders bringing their product based businesses to retail shelves. I'm your host, Roberta, and today's guest is Lindsay Holden, co founder of Odele Beauty, a clean, affordable, salon grade hair care brand that has really disrupted the beauty aisle by making really high quality products accessible to more consumers. Since launching in 2020, Odele has grown into a nationally recognized brand found in major retailers across the country. And I'm talking about major. She is already in Walmart, Ulta Beauty, which I went the other day and bought the hairspray, the grapefruit, which is so
Ooh.
beautiful. CVS and Target. And we're all ears to hear how she did it. Welcome, Lindsay, to Shelf Talks.
Thank you for having me, Roberta. I'm really grateful to be here.
Such a great, impactful growth story over the course of 6 years. But let's take it back to prior to you starting the brand. What was life like for you?
Prior to starting the brand, I had a long history in sales and consultative sales, doing a lot of different things, always somewhat retail adjacent. Or I had mentioned to you before we got on, we overlapped in Chicago where I worked for a mattress company calling on Sears, for example. I moved over to an image license business. And eventually it came a point of change, and it was either stay here or try school. And moved back to Minnesota to go to grad school, which became pretty fortuitous, which I can get to later. But out of grad school, I mean, it was incredible. It opened the doors for me to be a merchant at Target Corporation, where I worked for about 8 years as a buyer. And at the same time, I had three kids. So there came a time after three kids and 8 years where I'm like, God, I love this job, but I don't see really the traditional path here as one that I want to be on. And so wanted to take a beat and pause and think about what was next, which is real tough to do when you're working full time and have three kids. So was grateful to be able to do that. Took the summer. It was fun, but wherever you go, there you are. I didn't stay still for very long and started dreaming up what Odele could be and now has become. So that was in 2020. Well, 2019 is when we really started talking about the concept and seeing the opportunity.
After that 8 years in that merchant role and you taking a step back, was initial thoughts on starting something your own or just trying to figure out the next path in your life?
I've always been pretty entrepreneurial just by nature and kind of creating opportunities within the organizations I had been in. I love being a merchant, right? It is so much fun to own a category. I was actually always a merchant within the home category. And so it's really great space that balances both art and science and heavy in the design aspect as well. And so I just have a soft spot for home interiors in general. It's like when, I'm trolling websites, it's like what I'm usually escaping to go look at. And it is so wonderful to be able to have such immediate impact on these categories that you manage. And so learning year over year about what you might want to bring in, how you continue to grow upon the successes that you've had to keep building that business, to register more design, to, pass along as much value as possible to the consumer and just really balance like that business. You get to go really wide, if you will, and feel that impact in real time with the levers that you pull. And so when I left, I think like I'm an entrepreneur. I'm always thinking of ways to solve or add value in like retail and, shopping and seeing what's happening. I'm just such an observer and, everywhere you look, it's what you're inspired by. So I had no idea what I was going to do when I left, if I'm being totally honest. I thought it would be something adjacent to retail and maybe in the form of a rep or kind of adding value to brands who may want to sell in to a place like Target, but ended up connecting with one of my grad school friends who had been consulting in beauty and started looking at that category and just saying, why isn't there that brand that meets really discerning tastes at Target, frankly, or en masse? As a parent, you look at your shower and it's crowded, right? There's the fancy salon brands for you, there's the clean kind for your kids, there's the whatever kind for your partner, and there wasn't that one brand that was enabled to share with those who share your shower. And it felt like this really meaningful insight because so many people are used to hiding their good stuff, right? They're like train people for permission to use that, if you want to squeeze out the last drop because you paid so much of it, so much for
Exactly.
it.
Yeah.
And I think, what retail really taught me or what it really instilled in me is that, premium design and performance and quality like can and should be available at every price point, and I just wasn't seeing that within hair care.
How did you then validate that that was something that consumers would be looking for, or, they as well didn't feel like it was part of something that they could purchase?
Sure. I think, you're not always as a merchant like buying for yourself, right? In this case, we were developing for ourselves. And so at the same time, I'd say we were almost like our own toughest audience. Like, why does the world need another shampoo? Right? It's already a crowded space. And so we really took a hard look at like what was out there, both in stores, both online, and said, there always seems to be this compromise, right? There's clean brands, but they were expensive. There's salon quality brands, but they weren't clean. And then the truly clean brands that were less expensive just didn't meet our performance standards. And so when you looked at that, we also looked at the category at the time. I'm a firm believer clean should be table stakes. At the time, it wasn't. Not everybody was just offering clean as the standard. There were differences that weren't meaningful differences. Take fragrance, for example, that really overly gendered just to then have the same shampoo maybe in the men's aisle versus the women's aisle. Or things weren't derm tested. What mattered most was obviously the performance of the product, but like offering a brand that could deliver on like meaningful difference between items. And that meant to us really benefit driven. People were confused when they walked up to the shelf. So I'm getting ahead of myself, but all this to say, it took us a long time to convince ourselves of the opportunity. And once we kept running it through all of these scenarios, we're like, you know what? I think we're onto something here. And if we can articulate that, if we can bring that to life, the consumer will take notice and it will be disruptive on shelves.
So, what were first steps once you made that decision that you wanted to move forward with this?
Yeah, I think, we talked to a lot of people too, right? And we had done a lot of research, both in observation, what are the benefits people seek. My partner actually called up one of the merchants and said, we have an idea. We know you see a lot. We'd love your feedback. I think that was also a massively validating point in our journey. And she said, you know what? I think you're onto something. Like, come back in 3 months. And so at that point, we're like, okay. And, we're in Minneapolis. There's a lot of contract manufacturing right in our backyard. So we almost set to work kind of reverse pitching it to these partners who could help make it. That's one thing to have like the idea of the brand. We're like, all right, here are the products, here are the standards, here is what we want to bring to life in the form of these 9 items. Here's the brand values. It all helps inform kind of the goop, right? We want to be EU compliant. And so we pulled together briefs and we reverse pitched that to contract manufacturers and said, all right, we told them costing goals. We did not tell them how much we were planning to retail the product for.
And that was strategically.
Yep. Because I think historically, right, the distribution model sometimes, dictates what a price should be. And here we were a brand that knew the proof had to be in the goop. We wanted the incredible performance and we didn't want to be biased by what that retail should be, right? We wanted to back into, hey, passing along as much value to the consumer in the form of this performance. And we'll take care of the rest by making really smart choices around the packaging that we source. We launched at retail. We needed that scale in order to realize some efficiencies and pass along value in that way. So it was all very iterative in the process, but a big important part of our equation. And, I mentioned I have 2 partners. So the 3 of us together came from very different experiences, vantage points. Shannon, my third partner, was ops. So she had the relationships with packaging, with labels. She knew how to get it on shelf. So it's just, it's overwhelming when you think of it all in total, but like
You all had your expertises too.
we have our expertise. We're like, here's the plan, here's the product, here's our ask at retail to be a successful part of that equation. Here's our go to market. And it all just kept snowballing.
Did the manufacturers, did they get it pretty quickly in regards to what you were looking for, or did that take some time?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely tested a ton of iterations of the products that we set out to develop. So we launched with 3 different shampoo and conditioner duos and a handful of stylers. I think there were 3 of those as well. And so the blanket standards, right? It has to be EU compliant. We want to use 100% natural fragrance that's gender neutral. These need to pass in terms of germ testing is true across all of the products, for example. But then making them discernibly different from each other and truly benefit driven. So we looked at the population. We said, okay, here's how hair type and texture is divided among the population. Here, majority of people fall within, straight to wavy, wavy to curly, curly to coily. And then these are the benefits they seek based on their hair type and texture. And so getting very clear in terms of, all right, volumizing is a key benefit for this percent of the population. And with that, they seek weightless moisture, smoothing. It's about frizz control. Curl, it's about definition and frizz, it has the highest moisture load. So it was a lot of testing and iterating to land with the products we initially launched with, but we were pretty clear in terms of this is what they need to do.
I feel like you were slightly ahead of your time because today's environment is definitely very much benefit bled.
Yes, it's getting better.
Yeah. So it's just very interesting that in 2000, that's the way you actually developed the product and thought about it first.
For sure. And you see too, like the channels they're shifting a bit. And I think when I look at salon, I didn't know why I was using the salon brand that I was using, other than my stylist told me this is what your hair will like. Right. And I speak French and I didn't even understand like what it was on the label. I was like, I just used the orange and cream bottle. And so I think like we really wanted to make it clear because you shouldn't need to require a PhD or you don't have to be a stylist to really understand like what it is that works for you. And so making that super clear in terms of product development, but then even how that shows up on the bottle to help that person as they're shopping the shelf, right? To be reinforcing of like, oh yeah, that one's for me. And still to this day, it's funny because I'm like, I use the orange and cream one, but people come up to me, they're like, I love your green one. I'm like, you like smoothing. So it's just like removing that headspace that's required to navigate this category and knowing that it's a brand that's got your back. And I really love on the back too. It's like we bubble in, like it's like, oh, is this for me? And you turn it around and it's reinforcing based on like your hair type and texture to just be like, oh yes, this is. So it's a fun exercise every time we have a new product to like repeat that formula because I think it really helps. Everyone is overstimulated.
So once you finalized those products with your manufacturer, you did go out in a pretty broad assortment of SKUs. Was
Mhm.
that something that you had already had a commitment in regards to being able to have so much shelf space? Or was that just something
Mhm.
that you felt overall needed to really round out the full assortment of the brand?
The latter, and it benefited us in terms of the shelf space, but, like, such a big part of our equation is being truly inclusive. Anyone who walks up to the shelf, regardless of hair type or texture, age or gender, could find a solution for themselves. And it wasn't to say out of the gates, like, "This is everything your hair needs," from, like, beginning to end, but it was like, there is a shampoo and conditioner that you could use and some very versatile stylers that will also help you on that hair journey. And so a brand block itself, spoken like a merchant is very important. And I think, out of the gates, we felt very strongly about protecting that in order to communicate like who we were, what we stood for, and even kind of the design of the bottle as a block was pretty disruptive in aisle. But we did not ask, for example, for all doors. We were like, we want to be in the right doors first. And as we helped carve out like the space for a higher price point at mass, it was really important for us to be where we thought our consumer was and where the brand would find the most success.
So where was that? What was that first retailer that you connected with?
Well, it was Target. So it was, again in our backyard. And I mean, I'll be honest, like former merchant, I know retail math, like we understood that channel a lot more so than we did D2C, for example. And on top of that, I would say our bottles were heavy and they're accessibly priced. And so that equation was much different. And we wanted that scale in order to protect the retail of $11.99. And so we ended up launching in partnership with Target in 2020, and we were in about 1,000 doors, a little over.
So you being a merchant and then going on the other side of the table, I'm sure you knew what brought you excitement when brand pitched to you. So what were those key things that you made sure was in your pitch in order to really
Yeah.
get that buyer to say yes?
I mean, You wanna make their lives easier. I think there's so many brands that just go and like, "Look at this shiny thing, it's amazing," but it's also understanding why that person would care, right? They're also trying to grow a business. You can learn so much by shopping the shelf, you learn so much, by what's out there and being offered, so it's showing up and reinforcing why you are going to become truly incremental to their current offering. What do you have that's unique about your brand, even when it is that whatever 100th shampoo. That is not something they're currently offering. And so that can be a lot of different things, but I think that that is something that's really important to keep in mind of why this is good for business. It's good for the consumer. You're adding value in a way that's not just going to steal share from current, but, bring in new consumers as well.
With that lineup, how were you able to convince them to give you so much shelf space?
I think talking through the brand and like what we stood for and what we represented within, her category. There are brands that have like 80 SKUs. We were coming and saying we want 9 and we don't want all doors. We want to prove this out in the right doors. So we asked about segmentation and hey, where do you over index in clean, for example, or even kind of looking at other categories where the high volume doors are ones that may be higher income, the people who would consider paying above $10 for a shampoo. And so we were not asking for the world. I think we were asking for very smart things. Like we were being very intentional with how we'd like to go to market. And so it didn't feel like a lot. I would say I subsequently have had conversations with merchants where they're like, we'll take 4. And we're like, no, we can't deliver on inclusivity for that. And that's a big part of like who we are and what we need to show up representing. And so there's definitely knowing your boundaries and knowing your ask is an important part of the equation, but it wasn't a hard ask. It just made a lot of sense for the success of both of us.
I love that, but just standing behind, like, how do you want your brand to show up on shelf? And maybe it's a no for somebody that doesn't want to really showcase it in the way that you know it needs to show up for your consumer base.
Yeah. For
Yeah.
sure.
So as you got that yes from a Target and launching in those 1,000 stores, it sounds like you were saying you already knew that retail was going to be on your roadmap. So was the manufacturer able to support that initial launch and be able to scale in that way?
Yep, yep, we
You had
were
your
we were.
operations
It
person,
was
so
a go. It was a go. I mean, we did. I don't know how she sleeps at night sometimes, but, like, yeah, that was I mean, what she would say is, like, the easy part, right? And what I think would have been harder, to be honest, is, like, finding that partner that had more the smaller runs, for example, that just wasn't who we were talking about, or that is a part of what drives price so much, and so we found the right sized partner to address like the inventory we needed. We had no idea how this was going to do when we set on shelves. And so we're like, okay, here's our forecast. What's the ramp up? I mean, not to mention COVID happened. So that was fun, but we had the right partner. That was just go, go time.
so what did launch look like?
Terrifying only because you're like, what's going to happen? And we're, big dreams, small budget over here. But launch went really well. We got to shelf on time in full. We really leaned in on sampling and reviews out of the gates to start to, build up those reviews to get this product in the hands of as many people we could to talk about it on our behalf. One of my first hires was PR to help navigate the beauty world and saying, okay, this is who we are, let's create some buzz, just kind of building awareness in the ways that we could. And then we, sat there and you refresh the sales on a daily basis. You're like, okay, how's it doing now? How's it doing now? And like, I know this as a merchant too. You're like, okay, don't make any like assumptions until it's at least like a month or so in. But
Right.
it was really fun, to watch that tick up in terms of productivity, in terms of discovery, to see that feedback loop and the reviews populating and the earned press start to build.
Was there any reviews that were surprising to you and what consumers were saying about your product?
We're so thoughtful and detailed about every aspect of like this brand and what we put into it and how it's designed and how it looks and feels and performs and what was so amazing was to see that played back to us when we weren't necessarily like telling people what to say, right?
Yeah,
And so I'm
yeah.
always like, wow, that doesn't matter if it doesn't come through. And so what was so amazing to me that it was truly coming through. We had very little budget to like tell people exactly what we stand for example, they were appreciating us and they were appreciating Odele for showing up that way and for delivering product that does what it says it's going to do, that rivals brands 2 to 3 times the price. It was like the messages were coming back to us, and that was amazing.
When did you know you were ready to go into that next retailer?
So we waited a while actually because of our capacity, our partnership, I think just like our growth mode. What's hard, I think, as a founder is putting on the blinders, right? You see all I see is opportunity. I'm like, go, 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 right? But there's value in waiting and learning and gaining, even just building responsibly. And so I think we were very careful because we didn't want to cannibalize any existing business. And so we did a lot of research around who our consumer is, where she's shopping, where that overlap might be or not. And at the end of the day, we felt really strongly like, you know what, like this is mass. We want to prove ourselves in specialty. We like to prove ourselves in drug. And part of the brand is being very accessible. And so that means being accessible where she's shopping and where she's already, where she already is. And so we launched year 3 in Ulta and CVS. And again, we've driven double-digit comps every year in Target. And so we did not see that cannibalization happen. So that made us more bullish in understanding kind of the journey and where she's looking to maybe be inspired, where she wants to replenish, and, just the different stories and roles they play in helping to build awareness in total for Odele.
Did the assortment change at all in regards to the various retailers that you were in? Or because you had such the breadth, it made sense across all of those channels?
Yeah. Yeah, it did. And, again, this is a very edited, considered curated assortment with truly meaningful difference between products. And so we went out with the same. And there's a few items that may be exclusive here or there, but they still hold that truth of like being meaningfully different from what else we offer on shelf. And so you see shopping behavior be a little different, like treatments and stylers may over index at specialty where, shampoo and conditioners are more of the hero at mass. So it's fun to see and understand those nuances, but it is the same assortment across all of our retail partners.
Did you see any overall surprises from products that you thought were going to be your hero items versus not?
Yeah, I mean, one today that's our hero item is our clarifying shampoo. And we were like, we really like the idea of this. It's a benefit that spans all hair types and textures can benefit from this benefit. But we had ranked it, I think, initially like really low in terms of like what else we were showing for that calendar year in terms of newness. It is still to this day like our number one item. And so there's always some surprises like that. I think when we develop into new products, it's like, okay, what are the benefits that we are not addressing that we could be doing better? Or there's a lot in development in stylers, which, has a little bit longer of a runway or can get more specific. But what I think we do really well too is that focus on overall like hair and scalp health and just kind of that bringing to mass what may not have been most common, but people really recognize like, oh, this is a very, elevated SKU in terms of its form and function that's not as widely accessible at this price point because I usually only see it in salon, for example. And so I think a lot of those items making more accessible that kind of performance has done really well for us.
How do you know when to add new products? What does that innovation look like for you?
It's getting harder as we get bigger, right? Because we want to just offer that edit and not overcomplicate. And sometimes an idea will come up and we're like, this product already addresses that. This is not unique enough. It's not different enough. So I do think it's a balance between like growth of our awareness and our core and then the newness that we bring in, one to either address meaningful difference or to really help reinforce who we are and the values, like of ease, of styling or hair health that also speaks volumes. But every year, I don't know how often you transition, but a lot of our retailers are once, maybe twice a year. And so we're usually on that cadence. And sometimes it's the format that will have that take a little bit longer. A lot of times it's like very loud and clear. We hear from our consumers like, oh my God, I love this, but I wish I had this too. So it's rounding out the assortment. We don't necessarily like chase trends, but I love like a movement, right? It's like what is commonly understood. I just see this category leveling up in terms of what can be delivered and what can consumers' expectations of better, better, better. And so addressing things like a scalp serum or rejuvenating scalp serum, for example. Like, I don't think that was widely available just a few years ago, even.
I love what you were saying just about
Mhm.
meaningful differences in creating that assortment growth, especially in a category that some would say, is oversaturated, but you're coming in really giving products that aren't typically in assortments for the consumer that's at that price band.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Have you seen any difference in assortment as consumers are starting to talk and think more about menopause and the connection to hair with going through
Yes.
that transitional point?
Yes, any, like, hormonal change, right? Pregnancy, postpartum, then get menopause and hair loss. So I do see that emphasis on overall hair health, and I like it so much more than kind of what was formerly anti-aging. We don't have products that are FDA, but, like, there's ingredients that are becoming more and more commonly known for having this benefit, and the understanding of, like, optimizing your scalp to promote growth, for example. So I think it's just kind of this more proactive, elevated awareness of what hair health means, how to achieve strength within the hair you have, but then optimal environment for growing and maintaining your strands as well.
So you talked about sampling, PR, and reviews being key as you were growing the brand and, of course, driving awareness. What's been the most effective marketing tactics that you've used either prior or continue to build and iterate on?
I don't think there's ever a time when we're not iterating on what is the most effective. So there is no shortage of opportunity to spend dollars to help drive those things. And I really think it's the surround when they all kind of work together that feels like the most impactful. And so for me, the most consistent is community
Mm.
and getting product in the hands of others, getting people to try it, re-engaging these people in our community to help us tell those stories. What you say to a friend is more valuable than what we could ever say as a brand out into the world. And I think enabling that, empowering that, and the landscape changes so quickly. So it's always a balance, and it's balancing retail marketing, it's balancing search, it's balancing earned sampling, reviews, like TikTok Shop wasn't even a thing.
Oh, right.
Like,
Yeah.
and now it's $1 billion business. And so it's like, wow, it's not boring. And it's really hard to measure sometimes too, because we want to drive it to our retail partners. We're not focused on driving it to D2C. So you sometimes lose kind of that visibility into like the closed loop system, if you will.
How do you balance making sure that you are kind of giving love across the retail channels when it comes to marketing and driving awareness?
We've got an incredible team. I think it's understanding kind of the behaviors and who converts where, really leaning in on the earned and driving them to those different places. And assortments are different and at different retailers too, where Target has a super broad, also has a super broad assortment, like drug, Walmart are very limited. And so I think it's a balance of SKU, of time of year, of messaging, audiences that we can segment, drive there, and learning what is most effective in each of those channels to drive growth.
What does your team look like today? How many people are with Odell?
Always have a handful of contractors, and we are at about 20, I want to say 25, 26. So we do
Wow.
have a full leadership team in place. We have a board. We have a bunch in marketing. We built out ops. We hired our chemist from that original contract manufacturer. It changed hands. So he was a free agent. We're like, come on over. So we're very much in a scale mode right now. It was build mode for a while, and it is scale mode now. As we look at our current retail landscape, like there's just so much opportunity even within our current retail partners. And so it's focusing on that. It's learning how to tell our stories, continue to refine and get our name out there.
Mentioned that your PR was the first person that you hired. What are the other important people from the onset that you felt were valuable from a hiring perspective?
I mean, everyone, you're just so grateful that there's people here to help out of the gate. We had rep firm to help manage the retail, just making sure the product was in store on stock, reporting back on the sales, item setup, all that fun stuff. Marketing was a massive help and hire, like just establishing everything for the first time, everything from web design to,
Oh, yeah.
or social management and community management. So I don't know. I'm just like, it's everybody.
Now, has this growth been all self-funded or did you guys get investment?
We did get investment. Initially, we had a friends and family round to help fund the inventory of that we were talking about earlier in the podcast. We took on some growth equity from a group called Stride. And so that brought a lot more of the accountability and decision making. Like we established a board for the first time because we needed to. So I think that brought a little bit more of that structure, more stakeholders, I think, along with the employees and more governance. So I think more invested opinions in decisions. So that's the scale that I'm talking about in the years that had followed that true build mode. And again, with more retailers, it took us a while to go there. That brings a lot more complexity too. There's not one the same as the other.
I'm
And so
sure, yeah.
learning how they work and what moves things on shelf and evolving priorities also adds more complexity.
What has been the biggest identifiers for you that you just make sure that you're always watching from a sales perspective in stores to make sure that you're succeeding on shelf?
If we've been there more than a year, I'm always looking at that annual growth rate. For newness, it's a lot of productivity, sales per store per week on shelf. That is the proof in the pudding. We're looking for the impact of our efforts and investments. And when we lean in on marketing, are those translating at shelf, or where are the signals that we may see that that's worth continuing to lean in on, whether that's search or like the digital percentage versus stores is usually one of the early indicators. But for me, it's simply comp growth year over year. And are we beating the category? I want to drive that at a faster rate than the category and not just by relying on increased points of distribution.
What was that point that you really said, this is going to work? This is something that I know is going to be truly impactful to the world.
Am I there yet? I'm not sure. No, I honestly
You're like, I'm still waiting.
I thought I had this question coming for sure. I was like, oh God. I'm like, here's my true colors. I'm like, oh my God, we can so much bigger. There's just like so much more to do. I mean, it really comes down to like those little moments. For me, it's so much fun now when people replay what they love and who you are back to you. I remember Ulta, for example, they have their field leadership, FLC, they call it, where they bring in all of the store managers throughout the country. And every brand has these booths and everyone's walking through. And like the first year and half of the second, we're like telling, oh, we're Odele, like introducing people to the brand. And like the third year, it's like I couldn't even get a word in. They're like, okay, and they're here and they're like, this is what I love. This is what you can work on. And it's just like, to me, that is making it when I am not like, I don't have to be that megaphone. I get to like receive, okay, this is resonating. This is what they love. That's what they want to develop into. So for me, that's, I love that.
So, what is next for Odele? I know you want to be everywhere, of course, in order for you to really touch every consumer in need of this product, which is great that the assortment really rounds out for everyone. But what is next? What do you envision for the growth of the brand?
Sure. I mean, I do think we have the potential to become a household name. I do think we have the potential to expand. We're well positioned to expand and find success in other categories. We haven't touched international. There's just still so much opportunity. And even within our current retail partners, it's like really partnering and thinking about how we continue to grow there with SKUs, the right doors with added value propositions and showing, different times and, driving excitement to get new people, continue to get new people on the aisle, all of those things. It's just like as a typical founder, I'm just like, okay, like I know now we can't do them all at the same time. It's like there's a lot of like hurry up and wait to make sure that when we do them like flawlessly and we don't mess it up, right? You have one chance. And so I'm very excited. And so we spend a lot of time as a leadership team really getting aligned on, okay, yes, and like in this year, and yes, and in this year. And so creating that path forward so we can focus on, maximizing value in the year that we're in and the year that we're planning for and know that that's coming in the not so distant future.
So, where can our listeners follow, support, and most importantly, buy Odele?
Sure. You can follow us on Instagram and TikTok. We're getting more active there, always through our community, but Odele Beauty, our website's odelebeauty.com, and you can find us at a lot of places. Target, Ulta, Walmart, we're at Drug, we're on Amazon. So wherever you shop.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Lindsay, for sharing your journey. I'm excited to see the continued growth of the brand.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was really, really fun to chat.
Yeah.